So in this tutorial I'm going to teach you how to do the Picot net stitch. So in between each of these sort of net squares we have a little Picot stitch that just sits there and gives a nice little bobble effect. This is a 2-row repeating pattern, so on the back of the work you won't see so much of the bobbles, so it's not a reversible piece, but equally it looks as nice on the back as it does on the front if you're wanting to be tying a scarf made out of this stitch into a knot at the front. So let's get on with the tutorial. Hello, my name's Karen Stangram and welcome to Conquer Crochet, the channel for tips, tricks and techniques for conquering your crochet. Everything I talk about in today's video will be linked in the descriptions below. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss a single stitch. So if you're keen to get going with this video, give me a thumbs up and let's do this. So in this tutorial I'm going to be using a double knit yarn. This is a Sheepy's Colour Craft yarn. I have my needle to sew in my ends at the end. I have my scissors to cut off my ends, and today I'm going to be using a 4.5mm crochet hook. Ordinarily I would use a 4mm crochet hook with double knit yarn, but for an open work stitch that I want to be a little bit lacier, I'm going to go up half a hook size. You can go up a half, 1.5, maybe even 2 hook sizes depending on the lacy look that you want to get with your yarn. Obviously the bigger the hook, the more yarn you're going to use up, so make sure that you have enough yarn in the colour that you want for your project. So let's move on. So to start off this project we need to make a foundation chain. You make your foundation chain as long as you would like it to be. In this example here I've done a foundation chain of 21, and I think that would be quite a nice size for a scarf if you're wanting a lightweight summery scarf for the spring or summer. So I'm going to start off by making a slip knot, and you can do this in whichever way you prefer, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through the slip knot to make my first chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as I say, I'm going to do 21 in my sample piece. If you want to just do a sample with me, 21's a nice number to go to so that you get a good chance to repeat the stitches in the different row patterns. Okay, so pause the video now whilst you make your foundation chain. So I have 21 stitches in my foundation chain, and that means I'm going to have 7 repeats of the pattern. So we're now going to just chain 2 more just as our turning chain, so 1, 2, and then we're going to do row 1. So we're going to double crochet in the second chain from the hook, so we don't count the one on the hook, so we go 1, 2, and we're going to double crochet in that chain there. We're also going to double crochet in the next chain, so double crochet. We're then going to make a picot stitch, and to do our picot stitch we're going to chain 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're going to do a slip stitch in that very first chain, so it would be the 4th chain from the hook, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and we slip stitch, so you insert into the chain, yarn over, pull through, you have 2 loops on your hook. You don't yarn over, just pull through one loop through the other and you get a little bobble. We're then going to double crochet in the next 3 chains. So make sure you don't go into the one you've just worked the picot stitch into. So we're going to go 1 and 2 and 3. Now this is the fiddliest row because you don't have much to work with. It's going to start curving on you, don't worry about that. It's because there's nothing there to sort of hold the row up, but that will straighten out as we go through the pattern. So we've done our 3 double crochets. We're then going to go back and do another picot stitch. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, slip stitch into the 4th chain from the hook, or the first chain that you made, and then we're going to double crochet into the next 3 chains. 1, 2, 3. And just to point out, because I didn't mention it earlier, I work in UK crochet terms, so I'm doing a double crochet. If you work in US terms, that would be a single crochet. Okay, we need to make a picot stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Slip stitch into that first chain we made, and then 3 double crochets in the next 3 chains. So that's 1, 2 in the next one, 3 in the third one. And this pattern is going to repeat all the way down to just before the end of our row. So we do 4 chains, slip stitch into that first chain we made, or the 4th chain from the hook, whichever way you prefer to think of it, and then do 1 double crochet in each of the next 3 chains. So 1, 2 and 3. So continue down your row with this pattern of your chain 4, make it into a picot, and then 3 double crochets. And I will meet you just before the end. You will think that you haven't got enough stitches, don't panic. I will see you just before the end and explain what's happening there. So pause the video now. So I've done my last repeat of the pattern, and you're thinking, hang on, I've got 2 stitches left over. So we're going to do 1 more picot stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do the slip stitch. And then we're just going to do 2 double crochets in the end. Tighten up that slip knot, and let's just have a look at where we are. So if you remember right back at the beginning, we started off with essentially 2 double crochets at the beginning, so we have 2 double crochets right at the end. Okay, so then it's all nice and even. So everything's got twisted there. So we've got 2 double crochets here before that first picot stitch. So let me just zoom in a bit for you. So we have 2 at the beginning, and then having 2 at the end makes it a nice straight edge for us to have. So that's the hardest row really, because it all sort of curves around and it can be a little bit awkward to do. So take your time with that first row. Don't worry if you need to go back and unpick it and do it again. The next 2 rows are so much easier. So for row 2 then, we're going to chain 5. You can either turn first and chain 5, or chain 5 and turn, it's up to you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this 5 chain is going to count as a treble and 2 chains. So the first 3 are the treble, giving us the height, and then 2 chains are going to travel over the top of this picot stitch. So what we're going to do now is make a treble. Remember, I'm working in UK terminology, so that would be a double crochet in US terminology. We're going to make a treble in this middle stitch of the 3 double crochets from the previous round. So you could look at it that you're going to skip a double, skip a picot, skip a double, and we're going to work into that stitch there. So going in with a treble stitch, then I'm going to chain 2. Do the same for the next one, find the middle stitch, so yarn over into that middle stitch and create a treble. And that's what's creating the boxes over your picot stitches. So chain 2, find that middle double crochet from the previous row and put a treble stitch in there. And we're just going to do this all the way down the row. This is probably the easiest and quickest row of the pattern. Make a treble stitch in that middle stitch. So pause the video now whilst you work your way to the end of the row, and I will join you at the end. Okay, so I've done my treble here. I'm going to chain 2 to travel over that picot, and we're going to do our last treble in that final stitch, and it's the one that's sort of curving round. So don't miss that one, because that's what's going to give us our straight edges. There we have our second row done. So we have our picot stitches in between these little squares. So for the next row we're going to chain 1 and we're going to turn our work. This chain 1 is not going to count as a stitch, therefore we're going to work in the very first gap that is here. So I'm going to go in there with a double crochet. We're then going to be working into the 2 chain space that we created earlier, and we're going to work around the chain. So I'm going to go in for a double crochet and going under the chain, yarn over, pull that yarn back round the chain. You've got 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops. Now we're going to make our picot stitch. So chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to slip stitch into that first chain that we made, the 4th one from the hook, and we're going to do another double crochet in the same chain space. We're then going to do a double crochet into the top of the treble here. Now if we were working backwards and forwards in rows and we were looking at it from the right side, the part that's on here, this side here, is the part linking to that treble stitch, and obviously when you turn it over it would be on the other side, on the opposite side. So we're going to work a double crochet into that gap there at the top of the treble. Then we're working into the chain space again, so a double crochet, a picot stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, slip stitch, and a double crochet, all in the same chain space, and then do a double crochet in the top of the treble. And we're going to do that all the way down this row, so we're creating the second row of picots. So double crochet, picot, and double crochet, all in the chain space, and then we do our double crochet in the top of the treble. So pause the video now whilst you work down the rest of the row, and pause just before you get to the end on the last set of chains here, and I'll show you what you need to do there. So I've come to my last gap, my last 2 chain space, and it looks like there's more than 2 chains, which there are turning chains here as well. So what we're going to do is do our double crochet, do our picot stitch, do a double crochet all into that gap, into that chain space, and then instead of going into the double crochet at the top of the treble we did here, we're going to find the 3rd chain, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to double crochet into that 3rd chain, because that chain 3 is counting as a treble in this row. So that is the end of row 3. So then when we start row 4, that's essentially row 2 again. So we're just repeating rows 2 and 3 throughout the piece. So you do your 5 chain, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, turn your work, and then you're doing your treble stitches into that middle double crochet of the 3 together from the previous row. Chain 2, treble into the top of the previous treble. And we just continue that all the way down the row and then repeat row 3 at the end. So I'm going to do a few more rows now so you can see what it looks like when it's worked up a bit more, and I shall see you in a moment. So I just worked up a few more rows so you can see how it looks when there's a bit more there. Obviously it's different on the back to the front, unlike some of the others, because we have a 2-row repeat and not a 1-row repeat. So what you'll find is the picots sort of poke through more on one side than they do on the other side. So it gives it almost a little sort of like a bobble effect. It's got a lovely drape to the fabric, which is really nice, especially if you're wanting to make scarves and shawls. And that's how to make the Picot net stitch. I really hope you found today's tutorial useful. If there are any information that you need to find out about this video, have a look in the descriptions below where I post all the links to any freebies and other videos I think you might find useful. Don't forget, if you have enjoyed this video, to give me a thumbs up below. Don't forget also to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you've enjoyed it and you'd like to see more of my tutorial videos. There are 2 other videos on screen to help you on your crochet journey, and I will see you over there. Thank you so much for joining me on this one, and happy hooking!